The Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution has an interesting constitutional history. So, the Eighth Amendment has several clauses and it covers more than one area. It prohibits excessive bail or fines, and it also prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Now, you might remember previously when I mentioned that some amendments in the Bill of Rights have been incorporated or applied to the states, while others haven't. The Eighth Amendment is a situation where the Supreme Court split it up, essentially. And the Supreme Court said that the part with regard to excessive bail or fines does not apply to the states. In other words, states can set their own bail and their own fines, and the Supreme Court, for the most part, is not going to become involved. On the other hand, with regard to cruel and unusual punishment, the Supreme Court does get involved. And the Supreme Court has said, we are going to become involved. We are going to say that you can do this and you can't do that. And particularly where that has been present is in death penalty cases. So there has been a string of Supreme Court cases coming down saying that, for example, you can't impose the death penalty for someone who was a juvenile when they committed the offense, right? You can't use the death penalty for someone who has particular mental issues. You can't use the death penalty in rape cases or child rape cases. So that's significant because you have states where they would use the death penalty in some of these types of cases were it not for the Supreme Court's involvement. And that's through incorporation. Okay? One case that's particularly interesting is the Roper V Simmons case in 2005. The Supreme Court said no death penalty for minors. And actually, if you look at that decision, if you look at the rationale of Roper v. Simmons, the Supreme Court was looking at international standards to determine what's cruel and unusual. Because think about it, those words are somewhat subjective, aren't they? Cruel and unusual. One person might think something is cruel and unusual. A different person might think differently. Separate those people by a couple hundred years, and they might think quite differently. So the Supreme Court, interestingly enough, and significantly enough in this case, actually looked to the international community and saw what other countries were doing with regard to the death penalty and minors. And so for the U.S. Supreme Court to look to other countries' laws for determining how states within the United States are going to administer their laws, that's a big deal. All right? So that's the Eighth Amendment and kind of the multifaceted incorporation that the Eighth Amendment has undergone.